Okay.
I'm Keisha Bawa. I'm the Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion, as well as the Chief Diversity Officer here at Hendrix. I want to welcome you to this conversation with Hines as we come together to celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so our moderator today is Harvell Howard. He is a 2003 graduate of Hendrix. And so I will turn it over to him for our conversation.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi.
Hi, how you doing, Dr. Hines?
I am surviving all of this modernism, Harvell. I just hope I don't hit something and mess it up.
Hey, I was just listening to your schedule. I like to have that one. That's straightforward, simple, and sounds relaxed.
Yes,
Simple.
that's absolutely it. I don't do a thing. I watch television, I read, I sleep, I eat, I watch television, read, sleep, and eat.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, well, we'll dive in. First, I would be remiss, Dr. Hines, if I didn't just say, starting out, thank you just for all the students from Hendrix, but especially the students that were there during my tenure between 1999 and 2003, and all of my colleagues and friends that were a part of Students for Black Culture. You definitely made our time there very enjoyable. Told us what we need to hear, what we wanted to hear, what we didn't want to hear, the whole 9 yards. But we really appreciated you serving in an unofficial advisor for all of us. So on behalf of our team, of our group during that time, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Hines. And then I was so blessed to have you for that 740 class, that writing class. I was late one time for the record, and you stopped me after that class, and we had a little conversation. And I think I got there every day at 7:38 from that point on. But I really appreciate just everything you did for me personally, but all of us in general. And I know that sentiment is felt by all of us.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it. The students made life at Hendrix absolutely possible for me.
First question, Dr. Hines, is, for I know at least 10 or 12 years, you were the only, I know Black faculty, but maybe the only faculty of color. What was that like, being in faculty, but also just the role that you played during that time? Can you speak to that experience of kind of being, on your own in terms of the only minority faculty during that time?
Sure. It's easy. And I hope I took that question seriously, the first one, and embedded in the question, in quotation marks, is how were you able to balance playing the game? And so let's define what playing the game is. Well, what do you think that's supposed to mean before I answer it? I mean,
Okay.
what does playing the game mean? Because see, it may mean one thing to me and something else to the person who posted. Now, does that mean being white at a white institution and not being black?
Watch out. Dr. Hines, that question actually was from me about playing the game. So basically, this is Atika, by the way. Basically, what that meant was, did you have to not be so black, not really acknowledge if there were overturns or prejudices? Did you have to adjust your attitude, adjust your decorum, being in social settings, being in the classroom with predominantly white students? That's kind of what I meant when I said playing the game.
Okay, I've got it. And no, so let's see if I can answer that. This is how I thought about the question. So I think I understand exactly what you're asking me. And I'll just give you my sense of that, and then you can tell whether or not I was playing the game or not. When I came to Hendrix to interview for the position, Dr. John Churchill and a committee asked me about my views and whatever. And I told them at that time that I had two issues that were always important to me. And they asked me what they were. And I said, it's women and black people. Those are my two issues, and they never change. And so I think it was very clear to them that that's who I was. And I recall, because I was thinking about this, and this is MLK Day, and thinking about life at Hendrix by myself. it was easier for me, not that it was easy now, but it was easier for me because I had already been teaching for 11 years on a college campus, on college campuses. I think if I had come to Hendrix without that experience, if my experiences would have been different. MLK Day, because I got to thinking about that because of what today is. And I remember that the day was made a federal holiday, I think, and I was already on, as Harvell said, Hendrix was on the term system, and the terms were unequal, but I got a 740 class. And I remember that all of that time, after the holiday was legal, Hendrix, of course, didn't observe it in that sense. And so on MLK Day, we as faculty were told to register students. So I had to be in my office from the time I got to work until 5 o'clock. And I recall going to a faculty meeting once, and I guess I was just tired. And I said to them, I raised my hand, and I always sat in the same spot in faculty meeting. And I said, how is it that I have to be in my office? I can't go to participate in the parade. I can't go, and Hendrix SBC students were always working at the Boys and Girls Club. I said, I can't go there with them. I can't do anything until after 5 o'clock because Hendrix put classes and registering students ahead of MLK. And I'm sure they thought, well, she's just kind of nutty as usual. But I told them, I said, I think you need to think about that. And so thereafter, Hendrix thought about how we could miss one day, just one day, and let us participate if we chose to do so. So this is my answer to playing the game. On another occasion in faculty meeting, because I'm not a very courageous and brave person, I just get fed up. And when I'm fed up, I say what I have to say. And we were sitting there, and the question always arose until they hired Dr. Jennings, which was after I had been here for 11 years and 4 months. They decided they could hire one more Black person. And I sat there and I listened to all these discussions, and most of the time I never said anything. And then one day, I guess it just hit me, I'd had enough. And I said, I would like you as a faculty to stop using the word qualified Black applicant when you talk about us. I said, I never hear you use it when you talk about any other applicant. And I realized, this is what I said, and it should be on tape because in those days, we could still tape the faculty meetings. And I said, you know, I'm tired of hearing that. And so from now on, if you're going to talk about whom you can hire and whom you can't hire, put qualified in front of all of it. I said, because what you're saying to me is that everybody sitting in this room is somehow qualified. I said, but I work with you every day and I know better. So in terms of playing the game, I never felt at Hendrix that I had to be something other than who I am. And I am somebody who basically is a coward. I don't stir things up. I don't think I do. I don't run around trying to upset anybody. But if you ask me what I think, I'm going to tell you. And when I get fed up with something, I'm going to tell you about that. And those are the sorts of things that my life at Hendrix was like. I just sit around and say, well, I don't think you ought to do that, and I don't think you ought to do this. And they would listen. And so it wasn't easy at all to be here by myself. And often, and people who know me at Hendrix know this, I would sit here because you know where we are. We're just smack dab in the middle of what, until Conway decided to tear up Markham Street, we're in the middle of the Black community. And so days when I wanted to see somebody who looked like me, I'd just walk off campus. All you have to do is walk off. It's less than half a block. And I'd go down into the Black community and visit, and I'd stay about 30 minutes or more. Sometimes I'd stay an hour. And then I'd feel better. I'd get up and come back on campus. And so there were ways of making my isolation, because it was isolation, when anybody here looked like me, even in the offices at the time, because I remember saying that at one point, and I remember saying it to Dr. Churchill and we were sitting in Reeves. It was one of those lecture times, and somehow they had asked me to talk about it, and I said, you know, what puzzles me about Hendrix, when you look around, we had 2 Black folk in offices here at that time. I said, you know, even Black folk know how to answer telephones. Why don't we have some of them in clerical positions? And so that's how I approached being the only professor of color at this school. I thought I had to do what I thought was the best thing to do. And I remember adding Things Fall Apart, the Cabe work. And I thought, well, they need to read this. I had used it in governor's school. It was good enough for that. They could use it in the grade books class. And so that's how I handled it. I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, tell me, and I can give you more examples of what I think it meant and how I approached it.
Great answer, Dr. Hines.
Well, I don't know how great it was, Harvell, but it's the truth. It's what I did.
The truth to set you free.
Well, yeah, I thought, you know, when I would go to people's offices and I talked to them about things, and I would make recommendations. I would say, well, you need to do this or you don't need to do that. And, you know, if President Floyd were around, he would say, you know, when I had something I wanted to tell him in my office at that point, because I came in just before the fire in 1981, so I was fortunate enough to move into Fawcett Hall. And so if there was something I wanted to say to President Floyd, I'd just catch him on the elevator. We just ride up and ride down until I got through saying what I had to say. And I'd get off on the second floor and go to my little cubicle. And so there are ways that you can approach situations without, you know, tearing up a building or using profanity or those sorts of things. That's not my approach to it. But my approach is to tell you how I think, to tell you what I believe, and to ask you to do something. And that was the same with President Dye. She wanted to make a difference here. And I remember saying to her pretty much what I said to Dr. Churchill. It was much later. But I said to her, I said, you have graduated. This place has graduated Black students. They have gone on to have professional careers. Now, why is it that we can't hire any of them to come back to this campus to do anything? You know, that stood out to me as an absolute buffoon. There was such a void there that it would just slap you in the face. You graduate these students, half of Hendrix, if you checked it out at the time, they were all people who had gone to school here. In every department, pretty much, every office, they had all gone to school, but none of them were Black. And I said, why can't you do that? And she did. What she brought on Dr. Jackson and Dr. Harden, Carmen Harden and Dr. Deion Jackson. She said, I can do something about it. So that's, to me, what you do. You don't sit and do nothing, but you approach the areas that you know are approachable. The same thing with the Board of Trustees, with Dr. Floyd. He and I had a long conversation. I said, why are there no Black graduates on the board? I said, you need to hear their perspective. So he said, well, do you have any in mind? I said, I know lots of them. And I just gave him a list. I said, here are a bunch of them. Call some of them. They can tell you. How can y'all sit up there and make decisions and you don't hear from any of them? So those are the sorts of things that I did in response to that question. And I think anybody can do it. There's nothing special about it. It was just, you have to tell people, because, you know, white people in a position of power, many of them have never understood, don't care to understand, and may never understand what it's like to be basically disenfranchised, to be overlooked for just about everything in the world, and to have people smile at you every day as if it's okay. And so at some point, it has to be said. And was I afraid of losing my job? No. Hendrix was frankly a very accommodating place. I think they just said, oh, there she goes. And I remember a faculty member saying to me, he was white, of course, and he said, you know, you need to learn how to pick your battles. And I thought about that, and I said, I do. Every time you hear me speak, it's a choice I make. And that's what I think this was all about. I don't know. I hope that answered your question.
Yes,
if
it did.
For me, and I'll
it did, Dr. Hines. And I think you might have touched on the next question, but you could you could skim it or go past it. But I'll ask two. I'll ask one, how did you handle increasing diversity within the faculty and staff? I think you answered some of that, but also everyone would be interested to know what made you stay so long.
I thought that was an interesting question. Increasing diversity? I don't know what you call increasing. Let's see. I I was here for 11 years and Dr. Jennings was hired. Dr. Jennings and I were here forever. And when I left Hendrix College, listen, now see, I approach diversity as how many Black folk have you hired, okay? But I do know that Hendrix became a bit more sensitive because see, Hendrix didn't have female faculty people. When I came here, I thought, I have worked at 2 different colleges and I come to Hendrix and what do I see? All 8 people. And one of whom was an adjunct faculty person. Where are the females? And I was here through many hiring decisions and what have you. Women candidates were often not treated very fairly at all. They were okay in the process of the committee. But once they were in departments, those women were verbally abused. And I will say that. And I'm sure that if any of them would answer today, they would say it because I know I had interactions with them. And so diversity for me was, where are the women? Where are the Black people? Where are the people of other cultures? And so when you ask me about increasing diversity within the faculty, I think Hendrix tried to do a little better with the staff. They didn't do a whole lot better. Can you imagine how many searches we had to hire somebody in computer science? There were at least 5. Okay? So I don't know how to answer that. How did I handle it? Well, I just kept saying, you have got to do better. But one thing I did do, and I'm not sure this is a good way to approach it, but obviously when Hendrix would be out recruiting for students, and many of you who came after I was here might recall having seen me at some of the recruitment events they had in Little Rock and different places. Well, I would certainly go. And after a while, Harvell, it occurred to me, Hendrix isn't bringing on more students. They're not bringing on more faculty. They're not really diverse, and diversity wasn't a word we were using at the time, but I'm saying they weren't bringing on more people of color. That's my word. And so I just informed them that I would no longer participate in any recruitment trips. And I did not. I simply said, and I remember saying this very clearly to the dean, I said, I can't participate when I know you don't mean what you say. You're not hiring them, and I'm out here putting a face on something that you're not doing, and I can no longer do that. And so I stopped. So that's how I did that. So now you say, why did I stay here then if they weren't doing it? There are multiple answers to that, but here are the simple ones. I took the job. When I took this position, I was already tenured where I was. And so for me, it was a matter of, does it work for me? And that was my first choice. It wasn't really, does it work for any grandiose idea? Does it work for me? Well, at the point of my taking the position and actually coming to be interviewed, it worked for me because my mother was a widow at the time. She could not drive. She lived in Menifee. We don't have family in Menifee because my mother's actually from Polk County. And so I thought, my brothers, I had no sisters. I had 2 brothers, and I'm the middle child. Both my brothers lived in California. Their wives were not going to relocate to Arkansas to help my poor mother. So getting this job at Hendrix College meant that I could be here to help take care of my mother. So it met that requirement. The other requirement was I was at home. I'm in Arkansas. I know Arkansas. I had be comfortable here. So that's why I came. Now, why did I stay? I said this when I retired, and I'll say it now. Hendrix was good to me. Was it a perfect place to work? No. But was it a good place? Yes. Because Hendrix allowed me to interact with students who were truly wonderful. I actually enjoyed the students. I don't think they ever thought I did, but I enjoyed the interaction that I had with them. The teaching environment here was a wonderful one. I had taught at two other places that were, the environment was totally different. Hendrix has wonderful opportunities. Why are you not taking advantage of them? So, join study groups. You know, you have so many students, and certainly Black students, they never want to join a study group. Well, even at Spelman, I was part of a study group. You can learn more if you're working with somebody. It's not a sign that you don't know it enough or that you're not good enough. So take advantage of those things. And more importantly for me, for the students, was engage in the class discussions. It always amazed me. You know, early on, Black students wouldn't take my classes at all. And I don't know why they wouldn't. I don't know. I guess they thought I was just nutty. And so they wouldn't. So I might go to class and have one lone Black student. Eventually I had two. And then sometimes I'd have three or four. But they never wanted to say anything. Well, if you're in a class, engage in the class discussion. That's how you get more out of it. Participate in the college activities. I remember when Carmen and I were talking about this, and I thought, Hendrix is never going to change if Black students don't become totally involved in the life of the campus. You're a student here, for heaven's sake. You're just not a body carrying a bunch of books on your back, weighing 50 or 60 pounds and going back to your room. You're here for everything the college has to offer, so take advantage of it. Use office time. How many times did I talk to students about going to see your professor? The professor knows what's going on in class. Don't come and ask me. I don't know what's going on in chemistry or whatever, but that professor does. And I know these people, they will talk to you. And if they don't, you need to come back and tell me that they won't talk to you, so I'll know. But don't ignore the opportunity to talk to your professor, your advisor. Talk to your faculty advisor. We're here to help you. If a faculty person asks you to come to an office conference, go to that conference. Not how long ago. I remember working with a student was it last year? It couldn't have been last year. So it must have been the year before, because I asked Miss Keisha if she thought we're okay if we created a kind of informal faculty tutoring group made up of retired faculty people who were willing to work with students, and particularly students of color, because I know folk need help. And she said it was okay after she talked to the powers that be. And so a group of us got together, and I remember I was working with a student. We always met in the library because I think you need to be in an open place where it's safe for everybody. And we were in the library, and I was looking at the student's paper, and the faculty person had persistently said, please come by my office. Please come in. I want to talk with you about this. And I said, well, did you go talk to the person? Well, how are you going to advance or get better in the class or understand why your paper is marked the way it is if you never talk to that faculty person? Those are skills that you have to have. And you have to be good at what you do. You know, if Spelman taught me nothing else, and it wasn't just me, it was all the other women who were there at the time, they said, you have a brain, use it. But part of that is that you have to be prepared. Well, you can't be prepared if you're spending all of your time sleeping, if you're spending your time not wanting to talk about it, if you're walking around with a chip on your shoulder because you're the only Black student in a class. Well, you're not getting what you're paying $50,000 for. You're losing all of it. There are resources here. Take advantage of them. You can't do that if you bring your baggage with you, you park it, and you leave it there, and it stays with you for 4 years. There are students who never came to a lecture given by these wonderful guests that Hendrix invited. You never came to an activity. I didn't see any of them. Even I went to the basketball game, and I don't even care that much for basketball, but I like the students, and I had students in my classes, so I went to the games. Participate in the life of the college. You grow by doing so. You learn from hearing the speakers. When I was at Spelman, I went to every speaker. Of course, I was there, you know, during the civil rights time. And it was important to hear people talk to us about getting out there, participating, demonstrating, because you had rights. Well, we're living in a time now where if you don't have the skills you need for the job you won't get it. And it won't necessarily have a thing to do with race. It will simply be that you are not prepared. So if you go to class, if you discuss, if you ask questions when you don't understand, notice how much that advances your understanding of the material. Or if you're just sitting up there just looking in his face, never saying anything, you're not getting what you paid for. But more than that, you aren't getting what you need to go to the next level. So I would say, you know, don't let there be anything going on at Hendrix that if you care about it at all, or you just want to know what's going on. At Spelman, sometimes I just went to things because I wanted to know what was going on. What is this about? And then sometimes I think, oh, it's a waste of my time. But other times it was valuable to me. So I would encourage them, and Carmen did this. I said, get on these committees. Be part of the folks who take the students on tour. Don't just say, oh, I don't want to do that. Yes, you do. You want to meet these students. You want to interact with them. It's a skill. Conversation is a skill. Learn how to ask, but also how to listen. And so those are the sorts of things that I said then, the same thing I'd say now. That's what you should do.
Similar vein, I believe we had a question in the chat regarding your time before Spelman, meaning like how did you approach getting prepared to go to a whole nother state coming from, and I'm from Conway, so I know how small Menifee is, but I assume you can attribute some of that to that close-knit community that prepared you and maybe even segregated schools that prepared you for Spelman.
Oh, absolutely. You know, Menifee was all black. Our books were all used books that they'd gotten from the white schools. They were all marked up. But we had a wonderful faculty, and they taught us that, back to what I was saying earlier, you have to be prepared. They kept saying there are better opportunities out there. And see, when I was growing up, what were my options? Okay? The Menifee, you could continue to chop cotton if you wanted, or pick cotton. But see, by that time, the cotton pickers, the machines, were taking that over. You didn't need them, or us, to be hoeing the cotton in the summer, or the soybean. Or you could come down here and you could work in one of the plants. But I hate hot weather. I do not like it at all. Winter, I love. And so I didn't have many choices. It was go to college and train one of these plants. And I worked in them in the summer because I had to have income. It's hot. I don't like hot. I had to do better. But more than that, growing up in an all-black town, because it was not completely all black. There were a couple of people who weren't black in Memphis at the time. But we learned how important it was to work together. It never occurred to me that I wouldn't be able to go to college. That was always something that my parents knew. We had two newspapers. You know, the Gazette came in the morning and the Arkansas Democrat came in the evening. My father encouraged us to read the paper. We'd talk about what we read. You know, it wasn't like one of these Father Knows Best, you know, series of that, but we talked about what we had read. We understood the oppression of black people. I mean, you know, when I was growing up, we knew that if you came to Conway, Arkansas, and you were black, from non-Conway, you needed to be out of Conway by 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There were also signs in the outlying areas around Conway that had the N word on it. And it said these people were not welcome in those towns. I grew up with that. And so I knew that if I wanted a better opportunity, I had to prepare for it. So I read. I was always a good reader, and I always liked stories. And so I used to tell the students, you know, when I was in the 6th grade, I had read Melville's book. They had one for, what is it? I'm forgetting it right now. because I'm not an Americanist, but I should know this. But anyway, I had read the book, and there was a beautiful picture on the inside of how the ship was rigged and so forth. And so I enjoyed that, and I read. Well, Spelman also knew that many of us would be coming from rural areas. We would be coming with lack of preparation, actually. And so they sent out a reading list. And on it, I think there were 200 books. I think I still have my reading list someplace in my house. But anyway, and they encouraged you to have read that before you arrived on campus. Well, there were my poor parents coming down here to Conway, to Helga's bookstore, buying these books for me to read so that I wouldn't, be so ignorant when I got there. And so I read every book on the list before I got to Spelman. Well, I'd never had a foreign language in my life, okay? The only foreign language I'd ever heard was something that didn't sound like me in Arkansas, all right? But at Spelman, there were girls who were coming in from boarding schools, and they had French and what have you. I hadn't heard a thing, and I was sitting there, didn't understand it. And so, I had to do a lot of catch up at the same time that I had to learn. But you have to decide that what you're trying to get, and I know many of you probably heard me say this to you when you were here, and especially when we were on the term system. I used to say, look, it's only going to last for so many weeks. You can put up with anything for a short period of time. And that's what I had to keep telling myself about foreign language. I had to go in, I remember in a math class at Spelman, I'd never heard of a binomial theorem. I had no idea what that was. And I thought I'd done pretty well in math and Menifee, but I didn't know anything about that. And so it was a matter of catching up, but also keeping up. But if you ask yourself what your objectives are, what is it you want out of what you're doing? And I wanted to be prepared to go further so that I didn't have to come and go into some field. I didn't have to, meaning field as in outside cultivation field, that I didn't have to go into that, and that I didn't have to go into a plant and work in a hot, steamy room for 8 hours a day. I wanted to be able to do something different. And so I told myself that however unprepared you are, and I was when I got there, that you just have to keep plugging away, because what you see as your result is what you want. And so it wasn't that difficult to grow up in segregated Arkansas, simply because I was growing up in a Black community. And I never had anybody. Atlanta was truly a new experience for me. Fortunately, I had been there before on a tour, and so I kind of knew how it looked, but I didn't know anything else about it. But I had relatives who had gone to Spelman, and so that helped a little bit. But I'd never had anybody to spit on me. I'd never had anybody in Menifee to call me the N word. I never had anybody suggest that somehow I was deficient because I was Black. Because I grew up in a Black community where we liked each other. And if we didn't like each other, we certainly put up with each other. But the school system was a supportive system. I remember faculty people, I still have some of those. They gave us books, and they told us to read. They literally gave us. I have novels that Mrs. Henderson gave me. I have books that Mrs. English gave me, and she was a Spelman graduate. They tried to help us be prepared for a life that was different from the prejudices that we saw outside. And so my growing up there gave me a confidence that I think I probably would not have had I not grown up in a community that was very much a supportive place. And I think it helped. Now, what's helping me deal with what we're dealing with now, I don't know. A lot of it is prayer, and those of you who know me, and that's many of the Black students who are in my office or in my classes, I didn't preach my religion, but I think everybody knows I'm Methodist, and I always have been, always will be. But one of the things I believe in is the power of prayer. And I have said that, and I have been leaning on that through what this country has gone through in the last couple of years. I know that God is in control of the universe. I simply believe that. And I believe that through prayer, we can possibly get through this. Now, everybody who knows me also knows I am not an optimist. I am a pessimist. I am Hobbesian to the core. But I know that God wants us to be a better people than we are. And when I was thinking about MLK's statement he made that he just couldn't accept the idea that we were going to be bound in what he called the night of racism and war. And he thought that seeing a daybreak of sunshine and hope, that I think his quote was, unarmed truth and unconditional love will win. That. I truly want to believe that. And I think that that is what is happening. But I also know that it just doesn't happen overnight and that we have to be vigilant. But we also, I said to myself, you know, there ain't a lot that would make me get up and march these days. Not a lot. But that would make me get up, get a walker, because my little cane wouldn't sustain me for a block. So I'd have to have my walker. But I would get a walker and I would actually march for that. I would march for freedom. I would march for truth. Because I want young people. See, I'm 74 years old. So I figure I don't have a lot of time left. But I know young people do. And I want them to have a decent life. I don't want young people to be young black people or young white people for that matter, young people anywhere. I don't want them to be afraid to come to Conway or afraid to go or afraid to be. Why do we need an armed bunch of folks coming to town in Conway, Arkansas, saying they're here to protect the police? The police can protect themselves. So you must be here for some other reason. Why would you be marching down here? Why would you be standing at the Faulkner County Courthouse? You know, you're not there to protect me. And so even in my old age, I make it a habit for my little going to physical therapy and doctors and grocery stores. I like to be on my way out of Conway by 3 o'clock. Simply because I know that there are people who don't think as I do. And I don't want to be bothered, to be honest. And so that's kind of how I deal with it. I also, when I pray, and I do, sometimes I do it 3 and 4 times a day, just depends on what's happening and what I think. I also ask God to help me be a better person, because I am not saying that because I hold certain views that I'm also a good person. And I think I'm decent, but I also know that I have anger issues. I also know that I'm not very patient. And if you recall, when SBC would be planning events, and you have to remember, those of you who go back to the 80s and 90s, SBC did all the MLK programs. It was as if, you know, he's black, it's up to y'all to do the program, until lately somebody in religious life said, oh, we can help host these programs. And so, you know, that can build up. That's what I'm saying. I ask God to help me be a better person than I am. Help me to get out of the way, because I can be in the way. Help me to get out of the way so that real progress can be made. I say this to many people when I go to city council, other places. You don't have to agree with me, but I'd like, that's a long answer to a very short question. Do you have comments about it? Or questions you'd like to ask me that weren't on Ms. Keisha's sheet?
Dr. Hines, that was a great answer. And I think it covered a lot. And I was grateful that you answered the first part for prospective students and even for some of us that may have children going into college, even though I got babies. So it'll be a minute. But that insight on how you approach going in, I think is going to be valuable. But also the context that you brought with with the community you grew up with, all the way as a continuum until today, and how you're looking at some of the societal issues that we have going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so one more, go ahead, Dr. Hines, I'm sorry.
I was just saying, we have to prepare. We actually have to prepare. We can't ignore this, Harvell. It is too important. We're at a very crucial time in the history of this country. It is too important to sit there and just say, well, I don't have anything to do with it. Yes, you do. Everything that's happening affects all of us. And we just have to decide how we're going to weigh in on it.
Good deal. Dr. Hines, the last questions that I have on deck here, unless others have questions, but is to ask you, you've been cited as having been an invaluable mentor for many students of color during your time at Hendrix and even beyond. What are some tips you have for faculty and staff of color looking to mentor students today?
I don't know that they're necessarily tips, Harvell, and I'm not even sure they're very good ones, but some things that bothered me at Hendrix, and they still do, is I know those of you who came in my office and with whom I had exchanges, I always tried to tell you the truth. And I know I did hear from some Hendrix faculty people that, well, they didn't want to upset the Black students. They didn't want to do this. And I thought, but you're not helping them. Tell them the truth. You know, if they're not performing well in your class, tell them. And don't be put off because they don't want to hear it. I mean, all of us hear things that we don't want to hear. But I think you can't be an effective mentor to a student, Black or white, if you ignore what the student needs to know. If a student needs to come to class, tell that student to come to class. And I certainly would tell my students, you better show up. If I told you to do something, I expected you to do it. And if you didn't do it, I followed up and asked you, why not? Well, they should be willing to do the same thing. Tell students the truth. But also, if you know of opportunities that they're not taking advantage of, encourage them to do so. Don't sit there and just assume they can't do it. Tell them that they ought to go to a lecture. Tell them that they ought to be out in the community volunteering. How do you learn what people's needs are if you're just closeted over here in this college? You're not going to learn that. So if they need to be outside, tell them to be outside. If they need to take on a job, I remember telling the student wanted to do an internship, and the internship was offered, and it was at AETN. And she said, well, I don't have any way to get over there. I said, you have feet? You can walk. When I was in graduate school, I walked 21 blocks a day. I didn't have a car. So I certainly didn't have money for a cab. That was paying my way. It wasn't a grant, it was a scholarship. And it was paying my way. So I had to use that money to pay for my room and board, to feed myself. I couldn't spend it on a taxi. So I get up, I remember I wore hush puppies, and I would huff it on to graduate school. So I told the student, I said, you have feet, get over there and walk. It's just right across town. See, we limit ourselves. And that's what I mean by telling the student the truth. Don't say, oh, yes, I know what you mean. And let's see if we can't find you. Or you can't do that. Yes, you can. If you want to intern at AETN, get over there. Get a bicycle. Borrow one. And we limit ourselves. And I think if you're mentoring, and I just mean if you're helping, if you're really trying to help the students, ultimately, please tell them the truth. Please help them to see an opportunity when they see a disadvantage. Encourage them to do the sorts of things that I talked about before. Don't sit there and say, well, yes, it's all right. Or they say, well, I just don't know how to do this. Well, go learn. And Hendrix has tutoring for every subject in the universe. And you're going to let a student not go and empathize with him? Well, I understand why you don't know. I don't understand why you don't go.
Dr. Hines.
Yes.
We have the saying it's going to time out in 1 minute, but I want to make one point. Hey, we want to give you a virtual big thumbs up. Everybody do that if you can see Dr. Hines that we really enjoyed it. Now we're going to restart. We're going to restart it for another half hour so that everyone can talk and ask questions. But this is going to time out. So I want to say an official thank you, Dr. Hines, and we're going to jump back on for another half hour to 1:30.
Controversial speakers and not safe speakers. And I got a feeling in the last couple of years that the speakers were all safe, and I don't think that's a good thing. I think Hendrix needs to develop a clear and recognizable support system for Black students as well as other students. and that every department should have a step-by-step action plan for how they plan to support students, because I think that is missing. And all the students who are first gen aren't Black. There are lots of other first gen students here. What's our plan? And it shouldn't just be haphazard. It should be a definitive plan that the campus itself, because I've said this for 36 years, you cannot have racial equity on campus when it's only faculty. It has to be holistic. It has to affect the police department here, security, excuse me, the security department here, the maintenance department, cafeteria workers. It has to be holistic. It can't just be one group here urging and trying to fight for equity. It has to be a campus effort. And I never sensed in my years here at Hendrix that it was a campus effort. Now I'm quiet. Somebody have a question?
I just wanted to say real quick, I graduated in 1998. My name was Lee Inman, and I had you for WIT. I believe it was like at 9 something in the morning. I'm a teacher at a K-12 Christian school, so a lot like Hendrix, and I teach 7th and 8th grade English. So I just wanted to say thank you for the lessons that you taught. But I also wondered for 7th and 8th graders if you had, of all color, 3 books that you would choose that everyone could read. What would those books be?
Okay, well, that is interesting. Well, I'll tell you what I have read, and it came as a recommendation from a Hendrix student, and it was Reading with Patrick. I don't know if you've read that, but it is about a teacher working with a Black student down in South Arkansas. And the student came from an Ivy League school, I think I remember. But I think everybody who teaches needs to read that book. It's called Reading with Patrick. It's very eye-opening. It's a very painful book, but it's also I think it's a very true book, reasonably so. And it's the one that I can think of right now.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Hi, Dr. Hines. It's Walter Pryor. Hope you are well. You look well.
Pryor, well, thank you. So do you.
I just wanted to say really quickly, I said this in the separate room when we first got cut off, that only one of my children met you, but both of them know your writing rules intimately and use them every day whenever they have to write. And I'm forever grateful for that. But I'm also grateful for the presence and the model that you set for so many of us, particularly Black students, but all students at Hendrix. And I've said this to you, I'm so grateful that I've had the chance to say this to you, but I'm also happy to say it again in this group. There's a passage in the Bible that describes a virtuous woman, and it says, and her children arise up and call her blessed. And as I consider myself one of your children among so many people, please know that I call you blessed, and I'm so grateful for the impact that you've had on my life.
You are so kind, Mr. Pryor. And I'm so glad to hear you say that. You know, when I encounter students, they'll say, you gave me a B. I went to the ophthalmologist in Little Rock, and I recognized his name, and he'd been in my fine arts class. But he remembered me because of a B and a comma splice. Then I thought I did more than that. So I'm glad. But one of the things, you know, back to that first question, I held Black students, white students, purple students, and all students to the same rules of grammar and composition. You know, if you're going to be a professional, be good at it. And I sit here now and they stick these microphones in front of people and they can't even make a sentence. And I'm sitting here saying, you graduated from somebody's college, you ought to be ashamed. You ought to. These folk will get on television, they embarrass me, so I hit the mute button. That I know, and I want to hear it, because you don't have to go to school and be ignorant too. Because I had a very good student, I won't call his name, but I used to tell him, I said, you know what, you can be dumb on 9th Street free. So why would you come to Hendrix and spend $40,000 and $50,000 to be silly? It makes no sense whatsoever. So thank you, and you know that I did hold you all to the same standards, period. There were no Black standards or white standards. And I remember Black students say, well, you ought to be helping us. I said, I am. I'm getting you to write a sentence that makes some darn sense. You know, you don't go around saying, he's seen him. Oh, Lord. You know, you give you a heart attack. Excuse me. See, I told Miss Keisha she probably should never let me be on whatever I'm on because I'm not very good at being quiet.
I first started at Hendrix. I had already known you. I'd known you through church. And so I asked my mom, because my mom works, most of you guys don't know my mom works here. I said, Mom, where's Dr. Hines' office? I'd like to talk to her. And she said, okay, it's right upstairs. We're all in Fawcett. And I went and talked to Dr. Hines on my first day in the registrar's office. And I said, Dr. Hines, you are now my mentor. I need to know how to do this, how to maneuver this life at Hendrix. And I have to say, I thank you for helping me along the way through my time in the registrar's office. And I think the things that I've learned from you will help me in my time here in the Office for Diversity and Inclusion, especially the part about telling the kids the truth. That's something I've always stuck to as well.
Thank you.
You know, some folks might not appreciate that, but I think in the long run, it helps them out a lot more
It's not going to hurt
than just
you.
coddling them or whatever it is that people do. So I want to say I appreciate that. All the mentoring that you've done for me, the help that you've provided me with to be the staff member that I am here at Hendrix. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I hope so. I mean, my truth is kind of painful sometimes, but we need to hear it.
Hines, this is Marquita Norman.
What?
How are you doing?
Now, the anesthesiologist.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for, oh my goodness, all the guidance, all the, you know, just the mentorship throughout the years. I mean, even after my time at Hendrix, we talked on the phone as I have tried to navigate through, you know, academic medicine. And it is, you know, when you spoke about like telling your students the truth, now I really know where I get it from, because that's one of the things my students tell me, like, okay, she's gonna tell me the truth. So I'm just so grateful for having had the opportunity to learn from you, how to teach, how to, you know, just mentor, and just how to love on your students.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it. But I think you have to. You know, nobody in Menifee ever lied to me about who I was or what I could or could not do. And I think you cripple people if you send them and, you know, pet them along. And I saw it happening at Hendrix. We're telling students, oh, this is all right. And I'm on the other end saying, no, that's not all right. So who are they going to believe? Them or me? You know, it's just me over there saying, you can't do that. You shouldn't do this. And they're saying, oh, it's all right. And we got some examples out there. Students who didn't do as well as they could have done because Hendrix faculty just let them go along doing nothing. But you can't succeed that way. So we need to be honest with students. And in doing so, you know, don't just tell them the truth, then leave them out there. Try to help them. And I certainly did what I could. I used to tell students, so you had a bad semester. That's not going to keep you from getting in graduate school. That's the beauty of writing. Acknowledge it and keep going, because you didn't have all bad semesters. And I remember saying that. That's what you do. You don't ignore the truth. Yeah, you had a bad one, but look at all the good ones you had. And that helps. That's what we do. That's what I do now.
Hello, Dr. Hines.
Hi.
This is Beverly Thompson, now Beverly Lackey. I have to say
Oh, yes, I remember you.
how much you mean to me, how much I appreciate you and Dr. Jennings in particular. Both took me in and made sure that I graduated. Remember going to your office and having meetings, and you saying, you want to make sure you graduate and with everything you want to graduate with. Because I was trying to with a theater arts major education, and that had never been done. And you said, we got to make sure we got everything covered. And I remember meeting with you and taking time. I wasn't a English major, and you meeting and taking time with me, and that means everything to me. My you. I appreciate you. You're always in my thoughts, sending you lots of love and care, but you made Hendrix possible for me, and I really appreciate it. And I will always think highly of you and think of you as a role model. So thank you, Dr. Hines.
Wonderful. When you would be in my office and we'd be on the floor and we could talk, and I would always tell you things in my office that I could not say in class, because that was important. And I did want all of you to succeed. I mean, you know, that's another thing that Black folk have to learn. We have to support each other. We have to. And when we don't do that, we do a disservice to the whole bunch of Black folk. It's not about us. It should be about everybody. And if we don't try to help each other, we're not going to make any progress. And so, sure, that's what we ought to be doing. Teaching isn't about how many books I could publish or how many papers I could write. It's also about how many lives that I can be a part of, and a part that's helpful, not a part that's harmful, because it does no good. You know, Luke 4 says that Jesus Christ said he came to help. He didn't come to harm. And that's what we should do as teachers. And we got to find a place for that. It bothers me that academia recognizes publications. It recognizes getting ahead. Where does it recognize interactions with students and support? It needs to recognize that. Now, as I said, Hendrix needs to do a better job of recognizing what faculty do or do not do to help students succeed at this school. And all of you are graduates, you know how difficult it is. And I don't lie to people. Hendrix is not an easy place for a student to be. The coursework is challenging. The timeline for getting things done, because I used to say that all the time in comp. I say, yeah, you're having fun right now, but you look up, you got only 6 weeks to learn all of this. And you'll be writing papers, having exams, and pulling your hair out. So it's a difficult place, but it's not an impossible place. And it's made more possible when we help each other. And that includes faculty. So as I said, we need a plan for helping students. And that needs to be there. The other thing I'll say, and I mentioned this because I think Tony is still on, if he isn't, he's part of it, but Hendrix has a focus group. And one of the things that I mentioned to them is that Kenyon College now has, as part of its tenure process, that the faculty person has to demonstrate what he or she has done, is doing in support of diversity. Now, Hendrix faculty would probably fall over and die if you asked them to do that, but we ought to. Why wouldn't we? If it's that important to you, then it ought to be part of the process of tenuring you. What are you doing to support diversity in your classroom? And we ought to know, and you ought to be willing to share it so that we can gauge it. Because I know that you can have difficulty in class, because I did in graduate school. Very first day, when I went to work on my doctorate, this man told a joke about the inn at the wood pile. And I sat there and thought, well, I guess I won't be in graduate school very long, because this is not going to work for me. But I didn't, scream and create an incident in the class. I waited until it was over, and I thought, well, here it is. I've only been here a week. I guess I need to leave. But I told him that day, I said, that was out of place. What point were you making? It had nothing to do with what we were discussing. I said, and I think the two of us need to get on some common ground right now. And I meant that, because I was not going to stay in a program where I had to hear jokes about inns at the woodpile. Too old for it? Time was over for it. And I guess he thought, well, and I was serious about that, because I was ready to leave that day. And I thought, this is not going to work for me, because I'm not going to spend time working on a darn degree and having to hear racial jokes. At some point, faculty people have to be accountable for their support of the diversity that the college advertises. And there has to be people who speak up. Anyway, That was what I did, because I thought I can't go to school and be uncomfortable having to listen to black jokes. I don't like black jokes and I don't like women jokes. So if you can get past that, you know, I'm pretty much okay. But I'm not going to sit there and listen to that stuff by anybody. And so, you know, anyway, I think Hendrix needs to look at that. I think Hendrix needs to they brought in Dr. Jackson did. I think she was the one who invited Dr. Lucius Outlaw from Vanderbilt. I thought he was one of the best speakers I've heard. And she allowed me to come to hear him. He was wonderful. And I don't think he made people in the audience angry, but he helped them to understand some things about racial inequality in this country. And that's what I meant by saying, bring back the controversial speakers. Don't feel that you got to, you know, put your arms around people. They can't stand controversy. Yes, they can. What do you think college is about? Let them hear alternative voices. And let those voices be people who make some sense. Have them read some things that will make them uncomfortable. That's why you have class. That's why you discuss. That's why you hear alternative points of view. But all this little sage walking around, we can't hear anybody, we don't want to run the students away. Well, you know, if they can't take that, they need to be somewhere else. Where it's all about arms around you, making you feel good. You know, if life were all about good, we wouldn't need any of the things that we're doing now. Sorry. That's what I think. We need to have a different conversation. And the Hendrix that I came to, and Mr. Pryor can remember this because he came to the same one, they had some difficult conversations. You know, there was graffiti over there in Martin Hall on the doors of the men's bathrooms, all kinds of ugly stuff written. It was not a pleasant place. But he didn't leave. None of you left. You stayed. And you stayed because it can be a better place. And I think Hendrix has become, certainly it's better than it was when I came. And not because of me. I mean, there were other people who worked, like, you know, Dr. Goodwin in chemistry. I remember here, Dr. Falls Corbett, lots of people here, Dr. James Bruce. If I start calling names, I'll miss some. Dr. Hindenburg, who brought Lois here in drama. People were making the effort. But then we sort of had a retreat. And we got people, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. Well, my goodness, what do you want to do other than draw a check? You have to want to do something.
I'm Dr. Reginald Talley. I took your class back in like 2002. And one thing I can really appreciate is that you definitely kept everyone at the same standard. You know, basketball player with Harvell, we was going out of town and we had a big assignment due, and you give me no slack. You know, you said, hey, your due date is the same as everyone else. But you not making any excuses, that's helped me out even going beyond Hendrix. And I go through everything by saying that there is no excuse. But I just really appreciate that, you know, just holding me to a high standard. So.
I remember you well. You were also a very good support to other Black students. And that's the thing. You know, we've gone through a very difficult time at Hendrix where Black students didn't support each other. And that was very disturbing to me because that's not the way it used to be. When you were here, Ms. Pryor was here, the Darrens were here, you supported each other. And then we reached a point where, my goodness, there was always bickering, and I could not understand that. And I remember this book, what is it, The Psychological Change of Slavery. And I remember reading it and saying, that's the slave mentality. We need to drop that. We must support each other. We must, that doesn't mean, you know, maybe you don't want to belong to SBC, that's all right. But don't spend your time out there talking about something you don't know or understand and pulling down other Black students. That's not what you do. And see, there needs to be a faculty member on this campus who will say that to those students. Don't just let them keep doing it because you don't want to engage in controversy. No, you don't want them to lose an opportunity. Tell them. You know, I thought once that I might just come on campus and walk around and tell them stuff because they need to hear it. You don't tear down other people. It's okay if you want to do something different, but don't sit here and bicker all the time and be unpleasant to other people. That is not what these students did. And I know you didn't do it because I saw you just about every day. And it was a wonderful working relationship. But somehow we've gotten away from that. So I hope it returns. And I hope there are faculty here who will just say it. And white faculty need to understand you can talk to black students. My goodness, they're just like students. They're just students. I talk to white students the same way I talk to all of you. Now, I haven't heard from any of them except for Ms. Hinman, but I know there's some of them out there because I sure had them in class, and they didn't like me very well, some of them. But I talked to them the same way I talked to you. And if I thought they were getting in trouble, I don't know where this conversation is going, but I, knew that they were smoking things or whatever. And I tell the child, you need to get rid of this stuff and stop it and go to class. Because I had advisees, and Lord help, they'd be so, into stuff, and it's poking up my office. I had to keep me a deodorizer, and I sprayed myself, get out of here with that mess. And you stop it and go to class. So I didn't treat them any differently, and they shouldn't treat any black student any differently. You want every student at Hendrix College to succeed. That's what you want for them. Anyway, that's what I would tell the faculty.
This is Christina Marshall, class of 2005. I just wanted to share just really quickly, I took your WIT class my freshman year. And in high school, I was a very intelligent, could turn a paper in without really looking at it. And you turned my paper back to me and told me this is not how we write in college. And so that itself got me all the way together. I never turned in another paper that was halfway done. But I thank you for that, because that's something I carried through all of my college, through my graduate school. And even now is just, not to just turn in things that are half done.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
I had to learn it too. I had to do the same thing at Spelman. They didn't let us just get away with stuff because they told us how difficult it was going to be for us to be professionals out in the workplace. And so they taught us to do well what you did and to do it right. And so we worked at it. So thank you. I mean, I tried to be sure that all of you were as well equipped as I could help you to be anyway.
Hines, this is Binky. I just wanted to say I'm so glad to see you. And I wondered if you would comment on the upcoming inauguration, particularly Vice President Kamala Harris. And I'd like to hear your thoughts and perspective on that.
Well, I tell you, I keep saying Binky Martin, but I know better. But I know all of you as you were, and I don't know, married names, but I have a very, I guess, weird view of all of this. One, I'm glad, but I also understand in my own thinking that a lot of what we're getting as negative feedback on all of this is less Biden and more Harris. And I think there is a segment of the population, I don't know how large that segment is, but this is all my thinking. I think they're more worried about the possibility that Ms. Harris could become president of this country. And that worries them more than anything else. I don't think they're so worried about Mr. Biden. I think they're concerned that, well, he's old and, something could happen. And guess what? We have a black woman as president of this country. Can you imagine? So when you ask me what do I think about it, I'm overjoyed personally. But I'm also absolutely worried, and I thought, why can't the two of them just go in a little room and get a judge and a couple of witnesses and get sworn in so that these folk won't come out with their guns and AK-47s or whatever else they carry and kill them. And that's really how I feel. I think we reached a point, as per what we saw last week, I think there's no limit to which these folk would not go. And I'm worried about their safety. But I thought, what a beautiful day. I actually cried when I saw that they had been elected because I didn't think I'd live to see it. And I felt the same way when the two people were elected in Georgia. I cried that day sitting in my house. I thought, there's a God. And I really think that that's what made it possible. I think God is showing us something. I think he is giving, a beautiful parable about the vineyard. America has been a protected vineyard. God has been good to this country. In spite of how mean and vicious we have been to other people. Native Americans, blacks, Hispanics. This country has a record of misery and viciousness and corruption. And anybody who doesn't know that somehow is just, I hate to say it, just ignorant, okay? But we haven't learned from it. And in that parable, all God did was drop his hands and let happen to that vineyard what happens to us. And look at what happened to us. You see, part of being better is to recognize that you've been wrong. And we as a country have difficulty with that. I hear people every day, they act like, well, what did we do? Or you hear, well, it wasn't me, I didn't do that. Yeah, but you benefit from it. They benefit from power. They benefit from corruption. So don't sit here and tell me that you're not part of the problem. Yes, you are. So you have to repent first. You have to acknowledge that you have done wrong. Then you have to set about trying to correct it. Well, you don't correct it by trying to throw out the Electoral College votes. You don't correct it that way. That's not what you do. You don't spend state money on your private little argument with black folks. That's not what you do. You sit there and say, yes, we've been wrong. We shouldn't have hunger in this country when folks are throwing out food. What is that about? We shouldn't have to sit here and worry about whether or not you can get a job when you just pass it on to your cousin. I probably shouldn't say this. But anyway, I used to say in Conway, well, there goes that mafia and that mafia, because all they did was hire their own family. And if you know who the important families are in Conway, all you have to do is go downtown. Where are they? They're all there together. Okay? Well, if that's what's happening, there's no room for anybody else. So think about it. So, Ms. Martin, I know I'm not answering your question. Happy? Yes, I was just as happy as I could be. Like I said, I cried. I thought, there's a God, because I know this wouldn't have happened without it. Now, what do we do now? Well, we got to support it. So, like I said, I'm willing to go out and walk and march and support. I'm not afraid. I said to someone the other week, I guess I was at some doctor's office, and he was telling me that I needed to get the vaccine and a whole bunch of stuff and how wonderful the world was going to be. Now that Biden was there, I said, you missed the point, huh? I said, it's nowhere near as wonderful as it needs to be. I said, but you know what? I'm not afraid of dying. What I'm afraid of is how I die. That bothers me a lot. But the fact that I'm going to die, I know that. So I don't mind marching, and I don't mind saying what I believe. Because somebody has to. We have to. We have to speak the truth to power. We have to speak the truth to injustice. And we have to tell folks, you have not repented of your viciousness, of the evil you have done to people, of the evil you're still doing to people. And we're not going to get better. God is not going to bless this country if we continue to do these things. He's given us a wonderful opportunity, the Lord has, to be better than we've been. And we have to take advantage of it. And I don't see us doing that right now. But I also know there are wonderful, well-meaning people out there, all of you and folks you know. So maybe, you remember I'm a pessimist, maybe there is hope. I sure believe that there might be for this country. Otherwise, y'all, we're doomed. If this opportunity is showing us naked without our fig leaves, well, the world has seen us without our fig leaves. Now, if we don't improve behind that, we can hang it up. So let us pray. I do every day. I said, Lord, help us. Help Conway. And I do. I really do. Help the nation. And I actually said I was going to come on campus and I was going to visit with your new president, Dr. Ellis Arnold, and I was going to tell him some things that I want him to hear. And at one point, I was actually going to go to a trustees meeting uninvited and say some things. And people tell me I shouldn't do that, but I thought, well, Lord, they need to hear something. What are they sitting up there doing? A bunch of nothing. And so it, you know, it just angered me. I thought they could do better. They know that we're in trouble. They should do something. And so they told me I shouldn't do that. But I was willing to do it. I thought, what are they going to do to me? Just call the campus security to come take me out? And they would have to have taken me to jail because I was not going to leave until I said what I had to say to them. You know, being a trustee ought to be more than coming to Hendrix for some dinner and whatever. I don't know if they get stipends or not, but it ought to be about the business of the college, not about having your name on some place where people say, oh, the Hendrix trustee. Well, that's not worth anything if you're not doing something. You know, they need to do something. And they were, in my opinion, they weren't doing a thing except sitting up there socializing. And then when you took all the meetings off campus and had a meeting in Little Rock, that was even worse. They couldn't even see how bad things were. That doesn't make any sense at all. It's just dumb. Excuse me. But anyway, that's how I think. And you can see why it's best to have me retired somewhere off in a corner, so I would not disturb the Hendrix bubble. But it needs a little disturbing, I think.
Amen.
Yeah. Are we out? Are we over? See, I miss all of you. Because, see, I could say to you whatever I want to say. And I enjoyed it, and you could say back to me whatever you wanted to say. It was always fun. So I miss you, and thank you for joining Miss Keisha. And I guess she was right. I told her I didn't think she knew what she was doing, asking me to come and talk to a bunch of people. Because you see how I am, and you see I need a lot of help. So you pray for me. I do ask people to pray for me that I might be better, I might do better. I'd love welcome prayer. I need all I can get.
We need more like you. We'll pray to have more like you, Dr. Hines.
Well, you're all very kind. I've actually liked this, even though I didn't have to do anything but look at this machine. It's been wonderful. Thank you. Well, don't laugh, you know. I don't know how to do anything. And see, when I was at Hendrix, I didn't have to know how to do anything. All I had to do was sit in my office and holler, help! And some student out there on the sofa would come in and help me. So I didn't have to learn how to use the stuff. And now that I'm at home by myself, I sure don't know how to use any of it. And I don't try. I just go with the telephone. I'm very good at that. Are we saying goodbye,
Well, Dr. Hines, of course, we're all grateful for your time, and we have to do this again. Keisha, we have to figure out how we can do some of these periodically, because we like a town hall with Dr. Hines or something. We just got to figure it out, but I think we can make this happen.
Yeah, we can come to campus and we can just read in reads and have a good time.
I like that.
Thank you very much for putting up with me. I really appreciate it. Because I don't think I've done anything worth your time. You just got to listen to me go on and on about stuff.
Keisha, I'll turn it back over to you to close us out.
All right, well, thank you again, Harvell, for moderating today and for everyone joining us. And Dr. Hines, I knew exactly what I was asking to do this because I knew, as much as I always appreciate our conversations, I knew that there were alums and other faculty and staff and students who always appreciate hearing from you as well. So again, we really appreciate it. And as Harvell said, we'll be sure to share all the messages that you got to just hopefully give you some encouragement throughout your day. And if Dr. Hines is up to it, we'll be happy to plan future events. So thank you all so much. Remember, today is a day on, not a day off, but yet and still, I hope you are able to progress as we prepare for the week ahead. So Dr. Hines, if you have any final words you'd like to say before we close out?
No, I appreciate it. I wish all of you well. Please stay safe. And I know that you will. I mean, you know, you got a good education. You really did. Hendrix was worth your time. And so I know, you know, right now I use Hendrix prepared doctors. I use Hendrix prepared attorneys. And I say to people, they say, well, why are you using those folks? I said, because I know them. You know, getting to meet you makes a difference. And so I appreciate it. I had no idea what I was going to do sitting in this room talking to a machine. But it's good to see your faces, to see your names. And I remember you. I know you think I don't, but I do. And it's wonderful. And I think you will be well in whatever you're doing. I just want you to be safe. Be safe. But also remember that sometimes you have to step out of safety to be safe. It makes a difference. So be good.
I can say how she changed my life. She has been my mentor for so long. And when she talks about speaking up like she does, you know, she's right. You have to speak up, even if it causes an issue. It just doesn't matter. In the long run, you have to speak your truth. And she has, I was the adjunct she was talking about, by the way. 7 women and an adjunct. That was me. And she really, really helped me through a lot of different things, but maybe some other people want to speak, but I'm so happy to see all of you. Anyway.
Likewise, I will just say that I think of Dr. Hines every single time I pick up a pen to write. And I say pick up a pen because I tend to like to actually write on paper more than I do on the computer. But even when I'm composing on the computer, her lessons echo in my head. And whenever someone says, oh my gosh, you're such a great writer, one, I tend to deflect it because I'm not sure. I don't always know if I am. But 2, I know that I owe so much of it to her. And it's funny, only one of my children met her because we were on campus for an event. But both of my children know her rules backwards and forwards. And they can tell you them, not necessarily knowing they come from her, but they know the rules that she ingrained in me. I mean, and that's just a technical academic aspect. In terms of the broader impact on my life, I was just sitting here listening to her speak, and she's so plain and direct, and it's never curated, it's never diplomatic, and not that it has to be, but she just simply says, plain and simple, how things were, how she felt. And there's something so very refreshing about that. One, as a Black woman in this environment, but also just as an example for us who are all navigating spaces in which we may be the one or the only or the outsider for that particular time. And so I am extremely grateful for her in my life, and so happy that we are having this opportunity to hear from her.
Well, thanks so much. I am one of the people who graduated in 2004 and never had class with Dr. Hines, but she had an open door policy of sorts. And one of my strongest memories with Dr. Hines is when, she knew my boyfriend at the time, and I was going through some relationship stuff, and she recommended me to read Their Eyes Are Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. I, at that point in my life, had never torn through a book, like, for fiction. I was always a nonfiction person. I majored in the sciences at Hendrix, and that book spoke to me in a way that only someone who is a lover of words and literature could, speak into a situation. And that was very powerful. And my second super fun memory with Dr. Hines, I met with her on another occasion, probably to thank her for making that book recommendation. And she said, I really think your hair looks great. You should go to Walmart and get one of those El Cheapo photos. And I did. And that was like a senior picture for me that I took at Walmart because Dr. Hines said so. And I still have that picture. I just appreciated how she would speak into the lives of anyone, regardless of them being a student. So I always enjoy hearing the student experiences from those in Dr. Hines' class. To me, she was a faculty member who had her door open